I am Cary Griffin, formerly of Griffin Hammis Associates, recently retired.
Yeah, Cary.
In America.
Yeah. While I've got you here, can you talk about the origins and evolution of customized employment and where it's going?
Right. So customized employment is an evolutionary process. I mean, it came out of supported employment. Supported employment started really here in the really late 70s. I was doing something that today you'd hardly call supported employment.
Which is what we call open employment.
Right, open employment in Australia. Mostly running crews, mobile crews and small enclaves in businesses, I was lucky to not come out of the field right out of graduate school and took over an organization and just looked around the sheltered workshop and said, what are we doing to people? This doesn't make any sense to me. And today I'd look at what I did 40 years ago and go, well, that's crap. But all the same, it's that evolutionary thing. And where I was getting information as someone who was a total novice in rehabilitation were from people like Tom Bellamy and Paul Wayman and Mark Gold, who were the university people who were really, changing the world around instructional strategies and the importance of work and understanding that everybody can work. And so Mark Gold Associates still exists, even though Mark passed away many years ago, and Michael Callahan, runs that today. And you can't talk about customized employment unless you talk about Michael Callahan, certainly. But as supported employment evolved, eventually in this country, it really evolved, I think, for most of us into meaning one person, one job, in a real company, getting the paycheck from the person or from the business, without any other interference other than a job coach, perhaps. In the late 1990s, I think, what we started to, in the mid 1990s, I guess, we started to recognize that a lot of the folks that we were serving had much bigger barriers to employment than we were used to. Right. Not that we hadn't worked with folks, who had multiple disabilities or were coming out of institutions, but the strategies were getting tougher and tougher to utilize. Right. And so some of us, and sort of it was a sort of parallel track. I know that Mike Callahan was working on what's today the vocational profile. We were working on and published in 1996 a manual called Person-Centered Career Planning. Those two documents were very similar in a lot of ways, which is really interesting. And I've always sort of deferred to Mike because I think Mike is much more eloquent than I am at understanding things. Plus, he's brilliant. Yeah. And what we found, though, was we were finding the same things. Right. Was that you had to start in where the person lived. You had to understand their environment. You had to understand not, what job can I throw this person in, but where's the ecological validity for this person? Where are they going to fit with a minimal amount of screwing with that environment? Right. And so we were both looking at person-centered planning. We had been using that for 10 years in employment, with very mixed results. People had these beautiful maps and plans, and their North Star was out there, and they were sitting at home in poverty. Right. It wasn't working for employment. There were things missing. So some of the things that we did, Dave Hammis and me and our team then, was to start look at, geez, if you've got all these life dreams and all this kind of stuff and these significant people that we've identified, where's the money part? So we started doing financial planning, sort of, with where do you want to go? How much money do you have to earn? Let's look at your public benefit. Can we leverage that into a business or a job? And then comes along, a few people in Washington, D.C. under the Clinton administration, in particular, Chris Button, who's still at the Office of Disability Employment and Policy. And she, she looked at what Callahan was doing. She looked at what Virginia Commonwealth University was doing. She looked at what Dave Mank was doing at Indiana and Oregon. She looked at our stuff and sort of started convening groups to talk about this. Okay. And, she's pretty darn brilliant and figured out, well, we need something new. And I'm pretty sure she coined the term Customized Employment.
Right.
We were throwing ideas around, and we were all using different names. And over the years, we've sort of identified, well, we're going to call this discovery, and we're going to call this, whatever we're calling it, right?
Yep.
Customized self-employment, and and customized wage employment, and we're going to sort of maybe redefine the role of job coaching and look at how we're developing jobs differently. It's a lot of the job development under supported employment where I kind of learned job development was this idea that, oh my God, there's only so many employers in the world, and you better jump on it. You better propose marriage on the first date because you're not getting a second date.
Right.
And what Customized did was it slowed that process up in the beginning to speed up in the end.
Right, because there's a pretty big investment at the beginning with the families and identifying
Yes.
vocational themes. And then, in your case, the lists of 20,
Right.
which
right.
seems to be that's the hard work from how I look at it. When you get to that point,
Right.
it gets a little bit simpler from what I can see when you start going off doing the informational interviews.
Yeah.
That seems to me to be all the hard work is right at the beginning in that.
Right. And finding those, the vocational themes is something that I sort of held in the back of my brain for many years. I was pretty convinced that there was something, whether it was nature or nurture, that we all have these multiple directions that we could go, but that some of us are more attuned to different vocations than others. And so, in America, we work in many states under what's called a milestone system. You get paid for every step forward that you take, right? And sometimes what we were seeing, both in person-centered planning and in the early phases of discovery, when we weren't very good at it, was that people were practically, making that day program again. Right. It's like, well, we're just, the person's different every week, and so we're just going to keep doing discovery and never get to employment. And so what I did was I said, this is a great time to maybe roll out my theories about vocational themes and to say, you know what? You got to have at least 3 ideas to go forward on any complex problem, right? You understand that when you're solving a complex problem, that the first solution you have is the easiest for you to manage, right?
Yeah.
And so if we throw that one out almost instantly, right, or it's the most obvious, and yes, we can go in that direction, but let's add some complexity to it, right? Let's have a deeper bench. Let's have something that we can dig deeper. And so if a lot of times when you work with somebody, there's a really obvious theme that they have.
Yeah.
So, you're working with somebody and, they're tearing apart their laptop computer and putting it back together and stuff like that. And you're thinking, how this guy has never he could never get into school to study computers or anything like that. But intuitively, he knows how to do that. But computers are not in and of themselves a lot of times a job. They're a tool to do other jobs, right? Like I use computers. I'm not a computer guy. I don't have a computer theme, right? And so again, that lack of other themes would lead you down the road with me. You go, oh, well, Cary has all these skills in computers, and you put me in a computer business, I'd last 5 minutes. I don't know that stuff deeply. I'm not interested in it. Right. It's simply a means to an end. But then you look at my other themes and you go, oh, well, he's a student of history. Yeah. Okay, now put me in a company where I can use a computer as a tool to do research, or to let's say automobile design or something like that. I can use that tool, but now that theme, which is still a legitimate theme, plays with another theme. We put those two together, and what do we come up with? Right. If you've got a third theme, you're even stronger, right? I mean, you put together computers and history and transportation, right? And themes are big. They're not job descriptions. A theme holds hundreds of thousands of of job descriptions potentially. And that's one of the things that we learned, and one of the things that I think Callahan has been very eloquent about is understanding that when you think in job descriptions, you have your blinders on.
Yeah.
You're not seeing very much. And typically one of the themes that comes up a lot is animals. Everybody loves animals, of course, right? We all love animals. And that's how you know you haven't done discovery a lot of times too. It's like, what are their themes? Music, ice cream, and animals. Well, congratulations, you've discovered a human being, right? Because there isn't a human being on the planet who doesn't like those three things. But if I ask you, okay, so animals is a legitimate theme. You've gone out, you've done some real activities with the person in the community. You haven't just gone to the pet store and looked at animals and watched the person smile. That would not be an activity, right? But you've gone out and you've ridden a horse, you've fed cattle, you've milked a cow, whatever it is. You've groomed a dog. Okay, now you can use skills to get that job
because they demonstrate actual skills, rather than
right. And that's what you're looking for in discovery are emerging skills that you could build on, interest in those skills and learning those skills, not just the fact that, oh yes, I like that.
Right.
I don't care what a person likes, I care what a person could do, right?
Yeah.
And that's what employers like that you like what they're doing, but that ain't enough to get a job. And so with animals, again, going back to that thinking in job descriptions, if I asked you to name 5 jobs that somebody who likes puppies does, you can name 5 jobs and then you're done. But there's hundreds of thousands of jobs for people who like animals. And my guess is that most people with significant disabilities may have met a puppy. They've never seen a giraffe. You have no idea what they're going to do with that, or milked a cow, or done. And so it opens up.
Yes.
It opens up the entire labor market to all these places that you never thought about, but that exist in every community.
Right, and that answers the question when people say, well, there's no jobs in our community.
Right, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, I live in a town of 900 people in the middle of Montana, and we live on a road that's 2 miles long. It's a dead-end road. There's 24 families on our road. There's 13 small businesses on our road, and there's not a sign on our road that says there's a business in here. And people in the next biggest town where all the programs are, a town of 100,000 people, they know what I do for a living, right? I have never in 20 years of living there had a job developer call me.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? Right. So we're not looking.
Yeah.
We're not looking where, and Australia is very much the same. I mean, you have it's very much an urban country.
Absolutely.
People live in the metropolitan areas, but there's people doing commerce all across.
Well, you're right. I mean, I walk through the little town, out where I am, and you look at it, and because you're tuned to this, you sort of say, wow, there are about 40 businesses here. Mm-hmm. And then you look at what the other things attached to it, and all of a sudden you think, gee, there's potentially 100-odd businesses here.
Yep. And most people don't advertise. I mean, we find that in rural America anyway, they don't have Facebook pages. They don't have a website. You're not going to find them through Google. You have to know your community a little bit. That's where you get to then, for every theme, you develop a list of 20 businesses where people with that same theme work, and to do that theme, you have to get to know your community and you have to talk to people. And it never fails that, let's say somebody has an animal theme. Again, that's a ubiquitous kind of theme. What I found not too long ago working in a rural community was that I found 3 guys running a blacksmith shop. Nobody knew that there was a blacksmith shop there, and they're making horseshoes and they're making decorative fences. And a business that supports 3 blacksmiths is a going concern. They're making a fair amount of money.
Yeah.
And could they use help? Well, I don't know. Nobody's ever. They're guys that do all the work themselves. I'll bet you they'd like somebody in there. And of course, you might start, and I would never ask for this. Right? Because people always want to ask who cleans up after you.
Right.
No, I want to know, how do you become a blacksmith, and where do you start, and what happens traditionally in apprenticeships and in skilled training is you go in and you make the coffee and you clean the toilets and you do all that, and in the last hour of the day, somebody teaches you something. A master craftsman teaches you something. And again, that idea that we hire people like us, we hire people who aspire to do what we do. There's a natural tendency for us to say, let me take you under my wing and show you what I know. And all we do in Customized in our approach anyway is that we play off of that.
Right.
Yeah, and we see, and there's natural support
Yeah.
built into that,
And
obviously.
it's interesting because often I come across organisations that say they do discovery, but they have a call centre or they have people ringing, and I scratch my head and go, but hang on, aren't we supposed to be out there
Yeah.
exploring the community?
Yeah, yeah. It's highly individualized and it's community based.
Right.
And again, it's an evolutionary science. I'm not sure it's a science, but there's a little bit of science in there. There is, as Mark Gold would say, there's a method. Right, and method becomes really, really important because in our country, our culture is how many shortcuts can we find to the paycheck, right? And what happens is, and what I tell people all the time is that customized employment is the shortcut. It doesn't get any shorter, right? Once you start taking shortcuts, the methodology is broken and now it doesn't work. And so you can't say, and again, I made this stuff up. When I came up with 3 themes, I played off just good problem solving, that people who solve difficult problems were telling me I have to have 3 solutions before I move forward because I know one of them's not going to work even though it looks obvious, and I need the other 2 because both of those together hold the solution, but each of them apart, even though they get close, they don't have enough. They're not robust enough.
Right.
They won't withstand scrutiny or changes in the environment or whatever. And so I went with that. But you'd be surprised how many people say, well, we found this one theme and we just went with it. Well, that will work once in a while, right? But you can't not do it. It's like saying, well, we don't like that person's mother. They're kind of mean to us, so we're not doing a home visit. It's like, okay, the home visit is elemental to discovery. Can you do discovery without it? Yes. But it should be a very rare exception. Very rare,
So it comes to the point then that if you think about the whole customized employment discovery process, in theory it's simple, but it's actually quite complex
Yes.
when you start to look at the various
Yes.
components because
Right.
there is almost
Right.
a process that you have to work through
That's right.
to get to the thing.
That's right.
How do you guard against, obviously you've got to learn this stuff and you can't learn it in half a day. How do you do this?
No.
You guys have been training people for decades.
Right. Right.
So what's the process to learn this?
Right. So sort of because of the way the systems work here and the accrediting bodies and all that, we still have to play within some of the rules, even though we kind of wrote a lot of the rules. We do a basic training, an informational training, 40 hours or whatever is kind of the base that you would do. And our approach is to mentor people or to provide on-site technical assistance, working with folks who need jobs.
Right.
And we lead them through the process. Because I can tell you all about discovery, but until you've been in that living room, running the process, using our process of smooth listening and not interrogating, sort of looking for clues. Again, that coming in with the mindset that I'm a detective, I'm not a fortune teller, that the process is going to unfold in front of me, that I don't need to push too hard, right? But I do need to push. I need to make sure that things are moving forward. There are just those elements that you get in information that until you've practiced them, you're not going to be any good at. This is not a theoretical, construct. I mean, it's got that, but this is really a hard work approach. And, just discovery alone, which I would have to say is a pretty darn critical element to Customized. We figure it takes somebody, doing it 4 or 5 times over the course of about a year before they're any good at it.
Right.
It's like anything that's skills based. It takes practice, and you learn the nuance, and you learn when to keep your mouth shut. You learn, here are the cues that I'm picking up from this parent that it's time for me to leave. That's interesting over there. Could we go pursue that? Because whatever it is, and really in a lot of ways letting go of this interrogation mindset or doing things like we have a thing in discovery when we do the initial home visit that we ask the permission of the person that we're working with, can we see your bedroom? Can you show us around? Now, some people would just say, well, it's kind of my private space. Cool, we'll get there eventually. Yeah. When you trust me, we'll get there, or we'll figure it out another way. But typically people are okay with that, and you go in and you see things that the person that they value, the things that they value, they've put around them. Of course, you go into some rooms and there's nothing, and you think, oh my God, this is what living in poverty and isolation will get you too. But we had an interesting thing happen. We went in with this guy, and there's everybody's got presuppositions about what people ought to be when they grow up. And we're working with a young man on the autism spectrum, and he's brilliant, of course, in computers, because if you're on the autism spectrum, of course you're going to be brilliant with computers. And he is. And he's taken classes, and his parents are very supportive of that. But they've also bought into this idea that if you have autism, you're going to work in the computer industry. And so we're talking about that. Now, that's one of those obvious themes that I'm talking about. That's a legitimate theme, right? I'm sure he would do some of that. But I said, yeah, hey, could we go look in your bedroom? Can you show? He said, well, no, no. Would you like to come out in the garage? And we said, well, sure, we'd love to go out in the garage. What's out in the garage? Well, 3 motorcycles. Nobody had ever mentioned the motorcycles. He knows how to take them apart. He rides with his cousins on the weekends. Right. But everybody had always told him, well, computers is where you're going.
Right.
He was totally, almost in a fetal position when we talked about computers. Man, when we start talking about motorcycles, woohoo!
Yeah, that's that second and third theme that no one explores.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
And which brings me to another point. When we look at customized employment, globally, where we've had person-centered planning, where we've had active support, and people
and those are all brilliant strategies.
Great.
Right.
But people have gone off and gone, oh, I'm going to make my own version of this, and I'm going to make my own version of that.
Right.
And over time, you end up with a situation where people adopt the name and not the practice.
That's right.
So how do we guard against that?
Right.
Customized
So again, one of the things that we're working on and that you're working on with us is this idea of fidelity to the model, and it doesn't mean that you're inflexible and you don't like innovation, but we know right now what critical elements have to remain. That still leaves enough wiggle room, and of course you're working with individuals, and every individual is different. So you build in this structure, right, with wiggle room, but you don't abandon the structure because usually people abandon the structure because they can't get paid for it, or they think it takes too long. Right. Not because it's not effective, right? It's like there's got to be a faster way for me to get this done, and sometimes you just have to say, this is the way we're going to do it. I mean, if you go into the operating room to have open heart surgery, you don't want your surgeon saying, I got a golf game at 3. I think I'll take a shortcut today. You don't want that, and I think that we have to respect the lives of people with disabilities enough to say, we're professionals, we're going to do this right, and a lot of us have tried the shortcuts. That's how we got to where we are. Right. It's not that we didn't fumble around and screw up. We did that for you. We did that for 40 damned years. We have screwed up people's lives so that you don't have to. Don't go out, there is no percentage in making mistakes. Right. And we know that it's going to evolve. We know that it's built in, right? That there is enough wiggle room and enough innovation in the system that, of course, we're going to get better at this and we're going to get more streamlined, right? But what we've tried to do is to take out as much complexity as we can, but still be effective. Einstein said that everything should be as simple as possible and no simpler, right? And he was absolutely right.
Yeah. Complex problems require simple solutions.
Right. But I think, too, when we're talking about the people who are paid some of the worst wages, those frontline people who are doing discovery, who are doing job development, who are doing coaching, again, they're doing the hardest work in rehabilitation. And there's a lot of pressure from above for them to streamline their process. And of course, outcomes then go to hell, right? But it also shoots yourself in the foot because this path that we're on to professionalizing those positions, when you take that shortcut, you say, you know what, I'm not really a professional.
Right.
You know, and so I'm going to cut my own throat here. I'm cutting my own salary,
Yeah.
right? Because my boss, who has never done this, is saying, could you do that faster? And I think sometimes you have to say, no, I can't do it faster. I'm going to do it better.
Right.
You know, and I know that, you know, I've been in that position, so I understand the pressure to move fast. So we've got to do a better job on our end of teaching leadership to say, you know what, this is how it actually works.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine that, you know, that you know, a car manufacturer would say, yeah, you know, airbags. You know, airbags are really expensive. So why don't we just write airbag on the steering column, and let's put an airbag in every other car. Nobody will ever notice. Well, that's what you're doing when you're shortcutting discovery.
Right.
That's somebody's life. And whether you want to think about it or not, this is life and death for people.
Yeah.
In many ways. And we don't have that. We don't have that sensibility, I think, a lot.
Okay.
So.